You know, Ransom, you know exactly what those things, with all those canyon petroglyphs, you know what those are, plasma discharge that they saw. So there would be a lot of safe spaces out west, tucked in those canyons and overhangs and mesas. And
say we had this scenario next year, like just all of a sudden there's bolts of lightning, it's just crazy outside, the weather gets crazy, and you're seeing all this electromagnetic activity. Say it just happened next year, where would you go?
investors could see some of the strongest price action in gold this year, according to Wells Fargo, which sees signs of a developing rally. The driver behind this new spark in prices is diminishing supply growth, and it could take gold to $2,200 an ounce. Gold supplies have flipped from excessive to deficient, and such times in the past have sparked some of gold's strongest price rallies. And many believe we're on the eve of a new commodity bull supercycle, which would only be the seventh since the year 1800. Patriot Gold Group has the no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver, and you may be eligible for the no fee for life IRA. So go ahead and give the folks at Patriot Gold Group a call to discuss physical gold and silver. And the knowledge that Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer 5 years in a row from 2016 until present. Click the link in the description box below for more information. And now on with the video.
And you were talking about some of the ancient Cherokee sites, caves and whatnot. What's fascinating is I believed I've deciphered a lot of the stones here in New Mexico with depictions of stepped pyramids. And in my opinion, those stepped pyramids that they show, each one are different according to the location, and they're a map showing the surrounding areas. And there just so happens to be one in the center of New Mexico along the Rio Grande Valley that shows three different types of step pyramids. And my theory is that those are the locations of the most cliff dwellings and ancient man. And also, those are also the locations of the petroglyphs. But beyond that, one of them shows an entrance under a giant mountain. And that happens to be the one that seems to be depicting Three Rivers, New Mexico, because behind the backdrop of Three Rivers, where the petroglyphs are, there is the only 12,000-foot mountain for at least 500 miles, I would say. And it's also the only habitable zone if there were bad times. It's the only place that has elk and deer and porcupine and things like that, pine nuts and other things that will survive cold. That's the only place. But underneath all of that mountain range, from its northern end to its southern end, which happens to be a place called Carlsbad Caverns, which is some of the biggest caverns in the world. Now, they don't think too many primitive man went in there. We know miners found it at certain times. But in other places like the north end of South America, the south end of Mexico, there are massive cave systems and cenotes, and they have found lots and lots of bones and artifacts in these caves. There's also giant caves in India, China, and Europe, and not to mention Turkey. And all of these places have evidence of massive dwellings that could hold lots and lots of people. And not only that, there's food in there, bioluminescent funguses, worms, insects, fish, all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't expect in there, whole ecosystems that can house people for quite some time. Now, if you added the idea, like some people insist that maybe in Egypt and other places, they had things like Baghdad batteries that could put out certain amounts of watts depending on the size of the battery. You could have lighting in there, totally due to just knowing alchemy, is what they used to call it, or chemistry today. You could produce electricity without a grid and have lighting and live for some time. And I wanted to talk to you seriously about, so if you lived in North America, which is probably where most people are watching us from, where would you go? And there are some places like Carlsbad Caverns and other places all across the United States. We have a massive cave system from Missouri and Tennessee all the way over to, I would say, about Nevada area. And it's weird that this channel runs along and starts on the 33rd degree parallel, and if you go across the southwest United States, you'll see that there are two zones, one up around where Diamond and Rex live in Pagosa, like a little south of there, where there's lots of canyons and things where ecosystems haven't changed in forever. So we know that there was water there, massive floods there, cliff dwellings, big populations of people living in times that were horrible in other places. Where would we go? That's a great topic. If you were just sitting somewhere in some state, where would you go? Do you know where a cave's at that's stable and could house you for some time? And then also, how would you drink water and eat food? I think primitive man has a lot of lessons to teach us if we would listen.
Yeah, because out in East Tennessee, there's this one really, really large cave. I think it's called the Lost Sea. And I remember going there as a kid. It's super gigantic. There would probably be a line of cars going there, I'm sure, if something were to happen. But if you go even further south, down toward the Georgia border, there's a whole other sets of caverns all the way down there, too. I mean, incredibly large. They have the Cumberland Caves, and, there were Native Americans living in there for how many tens of thousands of years. But where you look across the landscape, yeah, you got to wonder how many of those cave systems were connected to each other back and still is more the correct. And could you live in there? Yeah, possibly. But I've been in a couple underground cities. I went to Czech Republic, and there's this one area called Znomo, which is down near the Austrian border, and it's in the wine growing country. It's under a castle, and at the high time, they had 5,000 people living underground there. I'm not I don't like claustrophobia, and those tunnels are real small for me. And I've been to Derenyanku and a few other, I went to Turkey and Cappadocia. I've been to some underground cities. I'm not a fan because it's just so incredibly claustrophobic, because it was very like super wild style. In Znomo, they only have repaired just like 1 kilometer out of the 50 kilometers of tunnels. And you can go wandering through, but you definitely need a guide. But they'll take you through. And when you get into the areas that haven't been repaired since like the last 2,000 years, it's downright spooky and tight. And that's just not my scene. But they were saying people lived down there for years during the sieges and things. And I'm like, are you kidding me? No, thank you. No, thank you. I couldn't do it. For me, I'm not an underground kind of person like that. I don't think I could exist like that. Yeah, let me throw one last thing. Mustang Valley, for anybody out in Nepal who likes to do trekking, you ever heard of a place called Mustang Valley? It's way out west in Nepal. You need permits out the yin yang. You can barely go into that region. It's a high desert region. The Nepali government claims it's to protect the heritage, and they don't want to be too disturbed by the visitors going up there. They don't want it to turn into Annapurna or something. But lo and behold, all my underground cave research and whatnot, there are vast cities in Mustang, underground caverns connecting between mountain ranges and things. I think that's why there's so many permits needed and you can't go anywhere up there. It's because they don't want you to find that vast civilization of connected underground tunnels, cities, and I swear it looks like 40-floor apartment buildings that got buried up by debris in there, the precision of the floors and everything. I was so shocked. Because I wanted to go to Mustang, but there is definitely some interconnection in those mountains and a huge lost, massive underground civilization in Mustang area of Nepal.
Yeah, that's funny because that's what I was just about to ask you. You were saying you're claustrophobic. But, we have tons and tons of stories, and not just stories. We know of giant caverns. Like Carlsbad Cavern is a good example, but it's not one that's been habited. There are rivers in Europe that you can go down boats and go through these massive caves down there. And we're not talking claustrophobia. We're talking 100-foot ceilings, 20-foot ceilings. A lot of the stories that go back to ancient man talk about giants and underground cities. I mean, from the Greeks to the Sumerians, all of them talk about these cities underground, and all the way up into recent times, like Admiral Byrd and stuff. I don't know how much you've got into like Operation High Jump, but they're talking about massive subterranean caverns where cities are already established. So maybe that's not true, but we do know that in modern times, there are similar type things. Like, so in Missouri, they have massive underground limestone caverns that the United States government carved out. It's rumored that all of these are interconnected, like with Los Alamos, New Mexico, Holloman Air Force Base, et cetera, However, we do know that they keep all of the national artifacts in there, like copies of movies and yada, yada, yada. So if that's just what they're telling us, you know that they have massive backup reserve of government located underground. And if we're doing it, obviously cities and governments and armies of the past were doing it also. But my question is what if we get down there, is because there's different places where, you know, they try to keep you out of exploring stuff. And the question is there other people or other beings that are already inhabiting lower levels of the earth? We know there's fresh water down there. There's ways for things to grow. And if you had a whole system set up of a subterranean world, you open a book up to a whole new idea of as above, so below. And
Marshall, Will, and Holly on a routine expedition. Imagine how that 1,000-foot below drop, what it would take you to the land of Sasquatch. Because you really got to wonder, if those things have been inhabited for millions of years, we would not be welcome down there. And the deeper you go, the less welcome you become. You always got the ant people, though, because the Hopi always talk about the ant people coming out. So it's not the first time subterranean caverns are referenced or referred to with different civilizations with advanced technologies living under there. Remember, you wouldn't get reset as we're about to on the surface of the planet here. You could continue indefinitely with your society. I mean, so much that, you know, of what they told us the core was from when I was a kid to now has changed like 16 times of what it is. So,
and how would they really know, right?
Yeah, how do they know? I mean, what is really the science the deeper we go in the planet? And, you know, you said keep these areas off limits and, you know, don't let people explore. Those are called national parks. You can't even take a shovel in a national park. You can't look. You can't break through anything. You can't dig anything up. I mean, it's the perfect way to preserve something and not let any exploration go on. Like, look how much area of the world, or in the U.S. at least, is covered with national parks. Half the country, you can't even do anything for exploration. And imagine the amount of underground cave systems that could be explored and found had we be able to go into national parks and look around. Oh, you're going to disturb the newt. Okay. But what if we don't disturb the newt? What if we find caves? Like here in East Tennessee, all the caves, they're all covered in and they're all covered with rebar and you can't go in them anymore. They covered up almost every single possible cave you can enter anywhere. And then if you're in the mountains, you're on private property, you're in a state park, you're in a national park, you can't go in those caves. You can't take the rebar off and go in those caves and look around. Not allowed. Oh, yeah, how dare you get off the trail? You can't go walk around up in the woods and look for that. So many restrictions on what the exploration could be in our own modern time, even though we have all these satellites and all these things.
What's down there? You know, you brought up something, and I'm just going to leave you with this. You pointed out that most of those places you can't really do anything or national forest, and that just also happens to be where people go missing the most bizarrely. And then I leave you with this thought, if you've seen The Time Machine, how there's another society of meat-eating people below the surface and a group of agrarian farmers above the surface. They're making their self-nutritious so that something else has a better enjoyment in consuming them. No, but that is weird. Missing people right in those national parks.